I'm Rachel Whitmore, 34 years old, and despite building a successful career in corporate law, I've never once felt good enough for my father. With the annual family gathering approaching, I dreaded it more than usual this year. I had bought him a luxury car, a $110,000 gesture of peace and pride, hoping that this time, something might shift. What I didn't realize then was that inside my purse was a sealed envelope that would change everything. By the end of the night, I would finally understand the truth behind his lifelong coldness. Before I share what happened, leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to stand tall in front of someone who refused to acknowledge your worth, hit that like and subscribe button. This story might give you the strength you've been waiting for. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, in a house that looked flawless from the outside. My father, Henry Whitmore, built his legal firm into a multimillion-dollar empire. To the world, we were the perfect Southern family. But inside those manicured walls, the pressure to perform was relentless. Henry valued legacy and control more than love or connection. He never helped with school projects or attended music recitals. Instead, he scoffed at anything less than perfection. A 92 on a test was a disappointment. Winning second place in a debate was met with silence. Close doesn't count, he'd say. Only the winner gets remembered. My mother, Diane, was the emotional opposite, warm, kind, but only when he wasn't in the room. Around him, she dimmed her light. She didn't challenge him, didn't protect us when his critiques became cruel. I didn't recognize it as fear back then. I just saw her fading. I was the middle child, wedged between my brother James, 3 years older, a tennis champion turned partner at Dad's firm, and my younger sister, Claire, the peacekeeper. James could do no wrong. He followed every rule, mirrored every ambition, and earned every nod of approval. Claire, softer and more intuitive, learned when to speak, when to disappear, and how to make him laugh at just the right moments. But me? I was always too much or not enough. I pushed back. I questioned things. I took the hard road, Harvard Law on scholarship, working nights, building a name without his influence. Still, no matter how high I climbed, I couldn't reach him. And I was about to find out why. That it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But for me, nothing was ever enough. I graduated at the top of my high school class in Charleston and secured a full academic scholarship to Duke University, an offer I was thrilled about. My father, of course, pushed for Yale, his alma mater, and viewed my decision as a personal slight. "You'll regret not carrying on the tradition," he'd said, his tone flat with disappointment. At Duke, I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover living expenses while keeping a near-perfect GPA. Still, every time I came home for break, he'd ask why I wasn't interning at more prestigious law firms or shadowing someone important. When I graduated summa cum laude, his only comment was, "We'll see what you actually do with it." After school, he extended a tepid offer for me to join Whitmore and Associates, his Charleston-based legal empire. But I declined. I knew I'd be treated like a legacy token, an undeserving daughter, earning a seat someone else had worked for. Instead, I moved to Manhattan with 2 suitcases and no job, crashing on a college friend's couch and hitting the pavement with resumes. When I finally landed a junior associate position at a mid-sized firm, he said, "Let's see if you last 6 months." I lasted 10 years. No handouts, no connections. I climbed the ladder case by case, win by win, until last month, when I was named partner. At 34, I became the youngest partner in firm history. The pay raise was significant, enough to finally buy my dream apartment and still have money left. It also gave me the ability to make what I thought would be a defining gesture, a gift so grand that even Henry Whitmore couldn't ignore it. I bought him a black Mercedes S-Class with every feature he'd ever mentioned in passing admiration. In my mind, it would change everything. He'd see I was successful. He'd say he was proud. The car cost almost an entire year's salary, but I justified it by imagining the look on his face, the moment he might finally accept me. Looking back, I see it for what it was. Not generosity, but desperation. I wasn't just giving him a car, I was still trying to buy the one thing I had never received from him. Not respect, not praise, just unconditional love. The Whitmore family gathering always fell the weekend after Father's Day, a perfectly staged tribute to our patriarch. And this year, I planned to arrive with the loudest statement I'd ever made. Clinging to a sliver of hope that tomorrow, in front of everyone, he might acknowledge me, if not with pride, then at least with recognition. But this year held a deeper complication, one that had quietly unraveled the foundation of my identity just 3 months earlier. Out of curiosity, I'd taken a popular ancestry DNA test, hoping to explore our family's European roots. What I found instead left me breathless. My genetic markers didn't match those of Henry Whitmore. Statistically, biologically, he wasn't my father. I didn't confront anyone right away. The shock was too sharp, the implications too heavy. Instead, I carefully retrieved a DNA sample from his hairbrush during a brief visit home, just enough for a private lab to run a more definitive test. The results had been conclusive. Henry wasn't my biological father. The sealed envelope containing those results had sat in my purse ever since. My nuclear option. My truth. Suddenly, the years of being held at emotional arm's length made perfect sense. The lack of affection, the perpetual skepticism, the quiet preference he had for James and Claire. I suspected he knew. Maybe not consciously, but somewhere deep inside, he'd always seen me as other. Different. Not fully his. The day before the reunion, I drove the new Mercedes to my parents' home on the outskirts of Charleston. I'd arranged for the car to be detailed at a nearby luxury dealership. Everything was timed perfectly so I could deliver the gift while Mom was at her bridge club. I wanted this moment to be private. Henry opened the door in his signature khakis and button-down, always crisp, always composed. "Rachel, you're early. The gathering's not until tomorrow," he said, checking his watch as though I'd interrupted a board meeting. "I know," I said, heart pounding. "I brought your father's day gift early. Thought we could share a quiet moment." He took the small box from my hand, opened it with practiced politeness, and raised an eyebrow at the Mercedes key. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No," I said, gesturing toward the driveway. "It's yours." He walked to the window, saw the gleaming black S-Class, and for a brief second, his face lit up. Then it shifted back to calculation. "This is excessive, Rachel. What exactly are you trying to prove?" "Nothing," I lied. "Just wanted to do something nice." He grilled me about the price, insurance, financing, like I was pitching him a business deal, not offering a heartfelt gift. After the test drive, he parked the car in the garage, out of sight, and muttered, "Must be nice to throw money around." That night, alone in my hotel room, I called Taylor. "Take the car back," she snapped. He never deserved it. I wasn't ready to agree. Not yet. Still clinging to hope that tomorrow would be different, that in front of others, he might show appreciation, might finally see me. "Just promise me you won't show him that test," Taylor warned before hanging up. "Not unless you're ready for nuclear fallout." I promised. But the envelope remained in my purse, nestled between my wallet and phone like a live wire I couldn't quite let go of. It wasn't just a secret. It was the reason behind every unanswered question I'd carried since childhood. Sunday afternoon arrived with perfect low-country weather, warm sunshine, a coastal breeze, the kind of deceptive calm that made everything seem serene. I took the long way to my parents' estate just outside Charleston, rehearsing answers to the usual interrogations: why I wasn't married, didn't have kids, hadn't moved back home to join the family firm. At 34, those questions always carried an edge of judgment. As I pulled into the familiar circular driveway, I saw that it was already lined with Range Rovers and Teslas, extended family, law partners, and Dad's usual entourage of business acquaintances who somehow always made the cut for a family-only gathering. And there it was, the black Mercedes S-Class, now parked front and center. Not tucked away in the garage, as he'd done the day before, but perfectly positioned where no guest could miss it. I sat for a moment, collecting myself. Then I stepped out, smoothed the fabric of my navy sheath dress, checked my lipstick in the side mirror, and walked toward the house with the poise I'd developed over a decade of courtroom arguments and hostile negotiations. Mother greeted me at the door, her face lighting with warmth as she pulled me in for a quick hug. "You look beautiful, darling," she said before slipping back into her practiced hostess tone. "Your father's in the back garden with the Peterson group." The foyer was already buzzing, laughter, clinking glasses, and the familiar mixture of family and strategic friendships. And Beverly made a beeline toward me, her questions about my personal life landing like darts. Uncle Graham gave me a bear hug and boomed, "There's our New York powerhouse," loud enough to draw some curious glances. Then came my father, emerging from the garden with 3 business partners in tow, laughing a little too hard at some dull joke. His eyes met mine. A flicker of recognition, a tight nod, and then nothing. No greeting. No smile. No words. Just a turn toward Mother and a whisper in her ear. I forced a smile and turned back to my cousin Charlotte, diving into her update about medical school, pretending it didn't sting. But it always did. "Please come say hello to the Stevensons. They just returned from a financial summit in Singapore and would love your perspective," Mother said, touching my elbow with her signature grace. This was her method, always orchestrating social interactions like chess moves. If you found strength or inspiration in my journey, I warmly invite you to subscribe to this channel, where every story uncovers the quiet power of reclaiming your worth and rewriting your narrative. Here, you'll meet voices who've faced betrayal, overcome silence, and found freedom in their truth. Subscribing means joining a community that supports healing, resilience, and growth, because none of us should walk this path alone. Stay with me as the story continues, revealing the unexpected turns and new beginnings that followed my break from the past. Together, we'll explore how embracing authenticity can transform pain into purpose, and how choosing yourself is the first step toward a life truly lived on your own terms. Click subscribe, and let's walk this journey of empowerment side by side. The next chapter is just ahead, and I promise it's one you won't want to miss. Positioning people to avoid awkward silences or lingering emotional truths. Her interference had long served as a buffer between my father and me, an elegant dance around dysfunction. James arrived fashionably late, as expected. With him came Rebecca, always impeccably dressed, and their 2 children, glowing with the effortless charm of curated perfection. Father's face lit up instantly. He opened his arms for James, clasped his shoulder, and boomed, "The new car's sharp, huh?" Finally treated myself. I froze. Treated yourself? Not a word about who gave it to him. Not a mention of the price, the gesture, the daughter behind the keys. My lungs tightened as James laughed. "Well earned, Dad." "It's a beauty." Before I could react, Claire appeared at my side, pulling me into a long hug. "I heard about your promotion," she whispered, her voice soft, her use of my childhood nickname, Ray, cracking something in me. "That's huge." "Seriously, Ray. You're rewriting the rules." I nodded, the sting of dismissal still hot in my throat. Through the wide front windows, I spotted my father again, this time outside, animatedly pointing out the Mercedes to a circle of his business associates. He was gesturing to the trim, to the interior, even inviting one man to sit in the passenger seat as if giving a showroom tour. "He's been doing that since brunch," Claire murmured, handing me a glass of white wine. 3 full tours. "I overheard Mom telling someone you gifted it to him." "That was generous, Rachel." "It wasn't about generosity," I said quietly, watching him through the glass. "I just wanted him to look at me the way he looks at that car. Even once." "Not pathetic," she replied, her grip tightening. "Just human. But Ray, you need to hear this. Dad's never going to give you that moment. It's not because you haven't earned it. It's because he can't give it. Her words knocked the wind from me, not because they were new, but because someone else had finally said them out loud. And suddenly, the weight of that sealed envelope in my purse felt heavier than ever. The test results were no longer just evidence. They were a fuse. And I wasn't sure whether I wanted to light it or bury it. The initial investment looked risky to my partners, but I saw the upside no one else did, James said, his voice swelling with pride. Our father nodded from his leather armchair, legs crossed, drink in hand. That's the Whitmore instinct, he declared, as if pronouncing a family crest. Seeing value where others see waste. It's in the blood. The irony hit me hard. I reached for my wine glass, the envelope in my purse pressing like a stone against my side. Each word about legacy and bloodline deepened the ache. He had no idea. Or maybe he did. Either way, the falsehood twisted tighter around us. As James wrapped up his latest self-promotion tour, conversation shifted. Rachel, my Uncle Graham said, your mom mentioned you've had a big step up at the firm. Partner, right? That's huge. Especially for someone your age. I smiled, ready to respond, but my father cut in smoothly. It's a nice position for now. Finance is unpredictable. Not like property. Real estate is a legacy business. Brick and mortar, not paper numbers. Then he pivoted back to James. Real assets survive recessions. They pass from generation to generation. It stung, even though I'd braced for it. I steadied my voice. Actually, our division delivered 30.8% returns last quarter, 22 points above the market. And the risk model I designed is being rolled out firm-wide. A beat of silence. Then he waved his hand, as if brushing away lint. We'll see how that holds up when the next downturn hits. Numbers are only numbers. He turned to Walter Peterson, already launching into a question about zoning near downtown Charleston. I excused myself to refill my drink. In the hallway, Claire appeared, returning from the patio. She touched my arm. Don't let him under your skin, Ray. Michael's cousin works in finance. He said your model is shaking up everything. Her words warmed me, and yet I hated how badly I still needed them. As I approached the sideboard in the dining room, I heard Father's voice drifting from his study. Door cracked open. The car? Yes. Big step up from the old sedan, he said, chuckling. Walter's voice followed. Rachel told me she bought it for you. Promotion well deserved. Seems she's made quite a name in New York. A pause. Then my father's careful reply, she's always craved attention. Truth is, she owes everything to the foundation I gave her, private school, connections, business sense. The car? Just her way of finally showing she listened. The anger came swift and hot. I gripped my glass so tightly I nearly shattered it. The conversation continued, my father casually rewriting history, claiming he'd always pushed me harder than James and Claire because I needed more structure, casting himself as the mastermind behind the very accomplishments he'd belittled for years. I slipped away before he could see me standing there, anger cooling into something sharper, colder, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. As I stepped into the main hallway, James intercepted me near the large window where Mother kept her orchid collection. His expression was more serious than usual. Rachel, can we talk? He said, steering me toward the corner. Dad said you've been asking Mom some odd questions about her college days. What exactly are you looking for? His tone was calm, but loaded. I hadn't expected it. After the DNA results, I had gently probed Mom about her past, her time before marriage, hoping to uncover something, anything. I thought I'd been subtle. I'm just curious, I said smoothly. Women of her generation rarely had a chance to build their own identity. I wanted to hear her story in her words. James squinted, tilting his head, and for a moment he looked exactly like our father, calculating, cold. The resemblance, once familiar, now felt alien. Whatever you're doing, he said slowly, whatever point you're trying to make with all this, the car, the questions, just stop. You're creating problems where there are none. This family has a rhythm, a balance. Don't disturb that. I stared at him, stunned by how perfectly he echoed our father's mindset. I nearly laughed. Balance? You mean this hierarchy where dad celebrates your every win while erasing mine? That's not balance, James. It's control. He leaned closer, voice dropping. You're only where you are because of him. The Whitmore name carries weight. You should be grateful. Show some respect. Before I could respond, our cousin Charlotte appeared, breaking the tension. Everything okay here? Aunt Diane is looking for you both. Dinner's about to start. James switched his public face effortlessly. Just catching up with my sister. You know, business talk. Nothing major. He walked away with that same polished confidence he'd always worn like a second skin. Charlotte lingered, placing a soft hand on my forearm. My mom says your dad plays favorites like it's a professional sport. But for what it's worth, I think you've built something incredible, Rachel. Truly. Her quiet support hit me like a wave. After years of gaslighting myself into thinking it was all in my head, someone else had confirmed the truth. The dinner bell rang. I hesitated, my fingers brushing the envelope in my purse, the weight of proof still waiting for its moment. I checked the envelope one last time, confirming the test results remained sealed and untouched. Then I straightened my shoulders and stepped toward the dining room, bracing myself for the performance that was about to unfold. The Whitmore formal dining room had always felt like a monument to appearances, a long, gleaming mahogany table that seated 20, flanked by ancestral portraits with eyes that seemed to judge every movement. The space was elegant, yes, but distant like the man who presided over it. Every detail was meticulously curated by Mother, from the crystal stemware that caught the chandelier's light to the fresh orchids spaced at perfect intervals down the center. Place cards in flawless calligraphy made clear where each person stood in the family hierarchy. My card, of course, was placed halfway down the table, between Claire's husband's law partner, whom I barely knew, and one of Dad's youngest associates, who spent most of the evening on his phone. Meanwhile, James and his family were anchored at the head of the table beside my father, with Claire and her husband positioned as buffers between them and the rest of us. Mother sat at the opposite end, the symbolic distance between her and father perfectly matching the emotional one. The first course arrived with the usual precision, scallops with microgreens, plated by white-gloved staff. Then father rose, wine glass in hand. The room silenced without a word. Welcome, everyone, he began with polished ease. Each year, this dinner reminds me of the legacy I've built, not just in business, but in family. He smiled at James first, who gave a rehearsed nod. Then at Claire, who returned a graceful smile before subtly averting her eyes from me. I may as well have been part of the furniture. A special welcome to the Petersons, father added, nodding toward his business allies. When you're surrounded by excellence, more excellence tends to follow. He continued his toast, praising James' recent development deal and Claire's new board appointment, then concluded with a pointed remark, true success is found in those who follow proven paths, not in unnecessary reinvention. His eyes briefly flicked to me, loaded with meaning. Dinner progressed through 5 choreographed courses. The conversation was steered like a ship, with father choosing the topics, Charleston real estate, zoning laws, SEC decisions, all areas where he held sway. When Mother gently tried to mention my promotion, he redirected without missing a beat. Speaking of markets, he said, turning to Walter, what's your read on the Fed's tightening stance? And just like that, her effort, and my success, vanished into thin air. Rachel, your firm handles mostly domestic portfolios, correct? My father asked, tilting his wine glass. Somewhat limiting, don't you think? Given the global expansion opportunities. He didn't wait for a reply. And I understand your promotion followed the Langston account? Lucky timing that James introduced you to William Langston at last year's charity auction. Every word was deliberately constructed to reduce my work, to suggest that anything I'd earned came either from circumstance or my brother. Not from the years I'd poured into my career. Not from me. I kept my voice calm and light. Actually, our international division implemented my risk assessment model last quarter. And the Langston account came through a blind pitch review. No introductions involved. I saw Claire glance at me across the table, her expression quiet but knowing. She understood the rhythm of these exchanges. She had seen them for years. The pattern was almost theatrical now, complete with familiar lines, cues, and dismissals. The main course arrived, beef Wellington, plated with pomp, offering a few minutes of reprieve as everyone focused on slicing through puff pastry. It bought me a moment to collect myself. Father opened another bottle of wine. He was on his third glass, maybe fourth. His laughter had grown louder, his compliments sharper-edged. Mother's eyes flicked to him repeatedly, her hands fidgeting with the stem of her glass. Even James seemed uneasy, leaning in to say something only to be waved off. As coffee and dessert arrived, I felt the mood shift, less restrained now, more exposed. And then, as if scripted, Mrs. Peterson leaned in from across the table. "Rachel, you're still single, aren't you?" she asked, her tone warm if slightly pitying. Such a beautiful, successful woman. The men in New York must find that intimidating. I opened my mouth to respond, but my father cut in with a low chuckle. "Rachel's always been more focused on proving something than building something," he said, swirling his bourbon. "Some people chase accolades to avoid facing utter emptiness. Family requires sacrifice, a truth the Whitmore women used to understand better." The insult was wrapped in faux philosophy, but it hit its mark. I heard my mother inhale sharply. "Henry," she began, but he overrode her. Maybe if Rachel had shown more interest in the matches I introduced over the years, instead of calling them dull, she wouldn't be facing her mid-30s alone. It was cruel, practiced, and unmistakably public. I took a sip of water, letting the silence thicken. "Thank you for your concern, Father," I replied. "But as you always say, results matter. And mine speak clearly." The silence was heavy, unmoving. Dessert remained untouched. Eyes studied napkins and chandeliers. No one dared look directly at me. The pressure in my chest tightened with every heartbeat. A lifetime of moments like this had brought me to the edge, humiliations delivered in public, masked as fatherly guidance. Dismissals disguised as wisdom. The slow, methodical erasure of who I was and what I'd built. And there it was again, pressing from inside my purse, the sealed envelope that now pulsed like a live wire. I had promised myself and Taylor that I wouldn't use it, that I'd survive this night with dignity without resorting to scorched earth. But as the servers cleared dessert plates and poured after-dinner brandy, I knew something with certainty. Continuing down this path, this endless chase for validation from a man fundamentally incapable of love, was a kind of self-betrayal I could no longer afford. Father pushed back from the table with a quiet scrape of his chair, the unspoken cue for his favorite tradition, one of his off-the-cuff speeches, always timed to cap the evening before our annual Whitmore family photo. Conversation stopped instantly. Forks lowered. Eyes turned. He stood with his brandy snifter, settling into the familiar stance of patriarchal performance, the room falling into reverent silence. "Before we move out to the garden for our photograph," he began, voice rich and commanding, "I want to take a moment to reflect on how proud I am of the legacy this family continues to build." He swept one hand slowly across the table, a practiced gesture meant to feel inclusive, but landed like a stage cue. A family, like a business, thrives when every member understands their role in something greater than themselves. His gaze moved, almost theatrically, across the table. He turned first to James. "James, your instincts and discipline continue to shape the future of Whitmore development. The Langston acquisition was bold, calculated, and shows exactly the kind of foresight we've built our name on. You've not just carried forward my principles, you've advanced them." James offered a modest smile, but his eyes gleamed with satisfaction. He had been waiting for this moment all night. Then came Claire. And Claire, my father said, softening his tone slightly, you found that rare balance between public service and family devotion. Your work with the medical board and the Children's Foundation is inspiring. Your mother and I could not be prouder of the household you're nurturing and the integrity you bring to everything you touch. Claire gave a gentle nod, the kind that acknowledged the compliment, but also the performative nature of it all. I braced myself for what usually followed, pointed omission. The silent verdict. But this time, something worse came. His eyes settled on me. The pause was deliberate. His voice slowed. And I knew, whatever came next wasn't going to be a snub. It was going to be a strike. His voice shifted, just slightly, enough to sound reflective, almost thoughtful, masking the blade beneath the silk. I'm struck, my father said, by how differently people define success these days. He took a long, deliberate sip of brandy, letting the pause stretch like a violin string pulled tight. I'm proud of all my children, he declared, raising his glass with mock warmth. And for a half-second, I felt that irrational flutter in my chest, hope, still clinging like moss to stone. Then, except for the disappointment sitting at the table, it landed like gunfire. There was a beat of horrified silence, then, as if cued by social discomfort, a ripple of laughter. Awkward, uncertain, the kind of chuckle people use when they're unsure whether a joke is meant to sting or amuse. My face flushed, then went icy. My entire body felt suspended, separated from itself, as eyes shifted toward me, amused, sympathetic, embarrassed, but all staring. He continued. Some measure success in titles, in six-figure salaries, in things that sound impressive at cocktail parties, but lack legacy. He gestured around the room. Real success? It's measured in continuity, in loyalty to tradition. Not chasing vanity metrics to prove something to the world. He didn't name me. He didn't need to. Mother's face had gone pale as porcelain, her lips pressed into a bloodless line. James looked quietly triumphant. Sophia stared down at her hands. Cousin Charlotte, bless her, reached across to gently touch my wrist in quiet solidarity, but even that felt distant. I was spiraling inward. The sensations were familiar. Burning cheeks, throat tight, heart pounding against my ribs like a warning drum. My mind raced through every time this had happened before, the subtle jabs, the redefined successes, the narrative always shifting to ensure I remained lesser, no matter what I achieved. And beneath it all, pulsing steady in my purse, the DNA test. The sealed envelope that told the truth he'd always suspected. That I wasn't his. Not really. Not enough to be loved. Not enough to be included. He closed with a hollow toast to family unity, a final performance for the room. But something snapped in me. Not with violence, something cleaner. A thread pulled loose after years of fraying. I felt it go slack. The envelope wasn't a weapon anymore. It was my freedom. They were waiting for a reaction. A breakdown. A walkout. They didn't realize I'd already left, quietly, completely, and on my own terms. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me, a clarity of purpose crystallizing around a decision that had perhaps been inevitable the moment the test results arrived. Without planning the motion, I stood. The movement was so smooth, so deliberate, that it instantly commanded attention. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, forks paused midair, all eyes turning toward me, some curious, others bracing for what was clearly coming. Those who had witnessed past Whitmore family fractures recognized the shift. My champagne glass remained untouched on the table, conspicuously not raised, the symbolism of my refusal to participate in the charade unmistakable. I smoothed my dress, surprised by how steady my hands were, as if the storm had passed and I'd emerged into its peaceful center. Thank you, Father, for that enlightening speech, I began, my voice even and unwavering, polished from years in corporate boardrooms. I've spent 34 years trying to earn approval that was never going to be given, measuring myself against expectations that moved every time I got close. The room was silent. Not strained, still. like it knew something irreversible was about to unfold. Mother's face tightened with alarm. Henry Whitmore's eyes darkened, his internal script suddenly thrown off course. For those tracking my supposed shortcomings, I continued, injecting a crisp lightness. I graduated top of my class from Duke, built my career independently in finance, and now lead strategic accounts across the Southeast. Not exactly a loser by most standards. My eyes swept the table. Some cousins shifted uncomfortably. A few nodded, just slightly, before quickly looking back at their plates. But in your world, Father, success has never been about achievement. It's about obedience. Conformity. Echoing back your legacy instead of creating our own. I reached calmly for my purse. Every eye followed. The quiet daughter, always respectful, always composed, was finally breaking formation. I bought you that car, the Jaguar. Not because you needed it, and certainly not because you earned it. But because I was still clinging to some childish hope that a grand gesture might finally earn me your warmth. I drew the envelope from my purse, the paternity test now feeling strangely light. For 34 years, I twisted myself trying to become whatever you wanted, not realizing the distance between us wasn't built by my shortcomings, it was built into my blood. Gasps rippled through the room. Mother paled. James sat upright. I placed the envelope at the center of the table. For you, Dad. Happy legacy. Happy Father's Day, I said with quiet finality, infusing the title with all the irony the moment deserved. Without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked out of the dining room, back straight, pace measured, preserving the dignity that had been stripped from me piece by piece over the course of the evening. The silence held until I reached the wide foyer, then shattered behind me with the sudden eruption of voices, dozens of questions colliding into unintelligible noise. I kept going. Outside, the Charleston evening had cooled, the breeze brushing my skin as if in quiet affirmation. The brick path to the driveway was lit by those same wrought iron lanterns Father insisted on importing from Savannah, casting theatrical pools of light across the gravel. The black Mercedes he'd positioned so smugly at the front of the estate gleamed under the house lights, a trophy on display. It had been my gift, bought with my bonus. I'd thought it would earn something close to recognition. All it bought was silence and a nod. Without hesitation, my hand found the second key fob I'd kept in my purse. The soft chirp of the car unlocking was almost cheerful, oblivious to the weight of the moment. I slid into the driver's seat. The leather still smelled new, faintly mixed with traces of his cologne, a scent I had once associated with strength. Now it felt like residue. From the windshield, I could see silhouettes gathering in the dining room, hands gesturing wildly behind the glass. The Matthews drama had officially erupted. The engine purred to life beneath me, clean, elegant, controlled. As if nothing monumental had just occurred. As I reversed down the curved driveway, the front door flew open. My father stood there, framed by the light, waving the opened envelope in one hand, his mouth forming something, maybe my name, but I couldn't hear it over the hum of the engine. There was poetry in the moment. The very car he once used to showcase power was now leaving the estate with the daughter he never truly claimed. A dual erasure, except this time, I was the one choosing what to take back. In the rearview mirror, the Matthews estate grew smaller, its sprawling grandeur shrinking with each yard I gained. The weight in my chest loosened. It wasn't happiness exactly, but something better. Clarity. The kind that comes when you realize you no longer need permission to be yourself. I made it nearly to the on-ramp when the first call came through. Sophia's name lit up on the dashboard screen, followed quickly by James, then Mom, and a flood of texts from cousins. The digital proof of the rupture I had just caused. I silenced the ringer, but didn't turn the phone off entirely. Some part of me still needed to witness the fallout even if I wasn't ready to respond. I merged onto I-26, not toward my apartment in downtown Charleston, but northbound, headed past Somerville, toward no particular destination, just away. A glance in the rearview mirror caught the moment Henry Whitmore, My father in name only ran into the road behind me. His always composed face was twisted into something I'd never seen before. Not just rage, something raw and primal, hands raised in a silent howl that cracked the mask he'd worn all my life. I couldn't hear his voice, but I didn't need to. The language of the body was enough. That image burned into my memory like a final scene in a play I'd refused to star in any longer. By the time I checked into a quiet boutique hotel in Mount Pleasant, just across the Cooper River, my phone screen showed 18 missed calls and 32 messages. A digital explosion. I placed the key card on the nightstand, kicked off my heels, and finally sat on the bed, scrolling through the wreckage. Sophia's texts began confused. What just happened? What was in that envelope? Then shifted to urgent. Rachel, call me. Dad's losing it. Mom's locked in her room. My mother's voicemails started steady. Sweetheart, just call when you can. But by message 5, her voice cracked. There has to be a mistake. Please come home so we can figure this out together. Please. James, true to form, kept it legal and cold. 2 messages. Return Dad's property immediately or face consequences, and you'll regret those accusations. No surprise. Their reactions had always followed the family script. Sophia, the bridge builder. James, the enforcer. And me, the one written out of the play even before I learned my lines. I sat in silence, holding my phone, the distance from that dining room already creating a strange kind of clarity. The test hadn't just revealed that Henry Whitmore wasn't my biological father. It explained why I'd always felt other. Why I'd been the target of subtle dismissals, why affection from him had always been something strained or performative. The discovery came after a routine DNA test, an impulse purchase from a holiday sale. I never expected it to upend my identity. But now the facade was breaking. Decades of silence were unraveling. And just as I thought the worst was behind me, Sophia's name lit up again, and this time I answered. That the earthquake I'd triggered had actually occurred in the external world, and not just within my own chest, was confirmed by the sound of Sophia's voice when I finally picked up. Rachel, she whispered, her tone hushed like she'd hidden in a hallway or pantry just to call. Are you okay? Where are you? Her genuine concern nearly pierced through the armor I'd welded on since walking out of that house. I'm safe, I said, keeping my response neutral. What's going on there? She exhaled, the sound ragged. Chaos. Pure chaos. Dad opened the envelope at the table. Right there. In front of everyone. Read it for about 30 seconds, then yelled for Mom. She came over, glanced once at the paper, and just froze. Face went pale. They locked themselves in his study for 10 minutes. Everyone else sat in stunned silence. And then, I asked, already knowing this was only the beginning. Dad came out shouting for you. Saw the car gone. He lost it, Rachel. Screaming in the driveway. I've never seen him like that. Her words felt strangely like a news report, detached, factual, but that helped. It kept me from sinking into the emotional undertow. And Mom? I asked, my voice tightening. Locked herself in their bedroom. She won't speak to anyone. Not even James. I nodded, unseen. That part didn't surprise me. The guests all left within minutes, she continued. Dad's been on the phone nonstop. James is going off about injunctions over the car. It's ridiculous. There was a pause, then her voice lowered even further. Rachel, is it true? There was no accusation in her tone, only a genuine plea for clarity. Yes, I said, my voice steady. The test is real. Henry Whitmore isn't my biological father. Saying it aloud made it solid. Irrefutable. Do you know who is? She asked softly. No. The test only confirms the mismatch. But judging by Mom's reaction, I'm guessing it happened before she married Dad. Sophia was quiet, then asked the one question I hadn't said out loud. How long do you think he's known? My whole life, I replied without hesitation. Every cold glance, every undermining comment, he wasn't trying to shape me. He was resenting me for existing. There was a beat of silence. I have to go, she said suddenly. James is coming up. Text me you're safe. I will. And Rachel? I love you. This changes nothing between us. Her words fractured something in me. I looked out across the harbor from the hotel window, my reflection blurring against the glow of Charleston's waterfront. Strange, quiet, and more myself than I'd ever been. Somewhere in Charleston was the man who had defined my upbringing through a strategic absence of affection, and somewhere else a man I'd never met, whose DNA lived in every cell of my body. The symmetry between these two paternal figures, one emotionally absent but physically present, the other biologically linked but unknown, created a strange, almost poetic equilibrium. For the first time, the dissonance I had carried since childhood made sense. Just before midnight, a final message arrived, this time from a number I hadn't seen in years. My mother's private line, seldom used and never for anything meaningful. I never meant for you to find out like this. It wasn't an affair. There was someone before your father in college. When I learned I was pregnant, he offered to marry me, to give you his name. Please believe me when I say he tried to love you as his own. Some men, they can't separate biology from emotion. I failed you both by pretending. Can we meet tomorrow? Just us? You deserve the truth. The words confirmed what I'd already sensed, but painted the history in softer hues. My father, Henry Whitmore, was both the architect of my exclusion and a man bound by his own limitations. My mother, long the silent accomplice, was now revealed as a young woman navigating a world that left little room for deviation. I didn't reply. I couldn't, at least not yet. Exhaustion took over, a deep and final kind of fatigue. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to rest without overthinking, without reaching. I let sleep take me without resistance. The next day could hold decisions about forgiveness, about truth, about what pieces of my life were still worth salvaging. But tonight, I slept. The week that followed was both achingly slow and frighteningly fast, the emotional equivalent of watching your house burn down and grow back all at once. That morning, I met my mother at a quiet cafe on the south end of Broad Street, far from any family landmarks. Her appearance stunned me. The Whitmore matriarch mask was gone. In its place sat a woman who looked older, softer, real. His name was Thomas Keller, she began, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. We met junior year at Wellesley. He was at MIT. Engineering. Brilliant. Kind. But completely wrong for someone from my background. 2 months after they were forced apart, she met Henry at a charity gala, the perfect match with the right last name. The story unraveled like a film I never chose to audition for. The Richardson account needs your risk assessment model explained in person, my assistant said over the phone. They specifically asked for you by name. Rachel, your reputation is growing. That moment grounded me more than she realized. Professional validation earned through results, not lineage, felt like a quiet victory. For the first time in my adult life, I felt wholly separate from the expectations of being a Whitmore. My worth wasn't something I had to argue for anymore. It was proven, recognized, and mine alone. 6 days after the Charleston revelation, Richard made his first direct move, through his lawyer, of course. A cold, impersonal letter demanding the return of the Mercedes and threatening defamation claims over my public accusations. The contrast between his response and Thomas Keller's kind, measured email was stark. Genetics, I was realizing, meant little compared to character. I had my attorney handle the vehicle's return, noting that scientific truth is not defamation. I didn't want the car I never had. I'd wanted recognition. Closure. James remained silent, unsurprisingly aligned with Richard, bonded not just by DNA but also ambition and outlook. Sophia, on the other hand, called nearly every night. We had never been this open. He's controlled the narrative our whole lives, she said during one late-night call. He made us compete for love. And I'm sorry, Rachel. I saw it, and I didn't speak up. That simple acknowledgement reached parts of me no apology from Richard ever could. For once, I wasn't the only one seeing it. 6 months later, my life looked radically different in small but powerful ways. Weekly therapy helped me untangle the need to prove myself, teaching me to value success not as validation, but as fulfillment. My relationship with my mother softened, too. No more performances. Just truth. Sometimes hard. Always real. And then came the meeting I once never imagined. Lunch with Thomas Keller, my biological father, in a quiet bistro off Meeting Street during one of his trips to Charleston. Seeing my expressions on someone else's face was surreal, yet oddly calming. "You get that analytical edge from Caroline," he said, smiling. "But the way your eyes light up when you talk markets? That's me." We didn't pretend to be a fairy tale father-daughter duo. We talked, slowly built rapport, shared stories. No pressure, just honesty. That Thanksgiving, I chose to sit at Sophia's table instead of returning to the Whitmore estate. It wasn't a rebellion. It was a choice to be with someone who had seen me fully and still chosen to love me. Maybe, at last, I was home. Richard had declined to attend when he learned I'd be there. His absence no longer stung like it once had. What used to be a sharp ache had softened into pity, a quiet acknowledgement of limitations I no longer tried to fix. "He can't change," Sophia said gently as we plated slices of apple tart in her warm Charleston kitchen, her children giggling down the hall with her husband. "Not won't, genuinely can't. His entire identity is built on control and legacy. You challenge both." Her tone wasn't bitter, just truthful. The clarity in her words mirrored the clarity I'd gained these past 6 months. After dinner, as I walked to my car, my phone lit up. It was a call from Mother. Her voice, once restrained and polished, now rang with sincerity. "I'm proud of you, Rachel," she said. "Not for your title or your address, though I know those took grit. I'm proud of your strength, your refusal to lie to yourself, your courage to live truthfully." I should have said this long ago. The words I had begged from Richard for most of my life, now offered freely by the parent who'd finally dropped her mask, landed with healing force. As I ended the call, I understood something deeper than DNA. Family isn't made by bloodlines, but by those who see you, accept you, and love you without condition. That Mercedes I once bought in a desperate bid for acknowledgement had long since been returned and sold. The proceeds went into my own investment fund, not just financially, but emotionally. No longer was I spending energy trying to be seen by someone who refused to look. Each step forward since that dinner hadn't been perfect, healing rarely is. There were hard days. But even on the hardest ones, I wasn't walking in circles anymore. I was moving forward. The real change wasn't in legal battles or test results. It was waking up on a quiet Tuesday and not questioning whether I was enough. It was finishing a project at work and smiling not because it proved something, but because it mattered to me. This Thanksgiving, I finally felt it. Peace not earned, but claimed. Knowing who fathered me mattered less than knowing who stood beside me, believed in me, and chose me, without performance or expectation. Have you ever found your true family outside the one you were born into? I'd love to hear your story. Share it below, and if this one spoke to you, don't forget to like and subscribe for the next chapter in reclaiming our truth. Like button, subscribe to hear more journeys of healing, and share this with someone who might need to be reminded that their value doesn't depend on anyone else's validation. Thank you for being here with me. For listening to a story that started with silence and ended in truth. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, if you've spent years bending, twisting, dimming yourself just to earn a sliver of love, then I want you to know something. You're not alone. And more importantly, you don't have to keep shrinking. I thought I needed Richard's approval to matter. I thought I had to perform endlessly to justify a place at a table that was always prepared for someone else. But the truth is, my worth was never his to give. It was always mine. The moment I stopped chasing validation and started choosing peace was the moment my real life began. I still don't know what kind of relationship, if any, I'll have with Richard. Or even with James. But I've made peace with the unknown. Because now I know who I am. I know where I come from, and more importantly, I know where I'm going. To those of you watching who've been erased, silenced, or dismissed, hear me now. You are not invisible. Your truth matters, your voice matters, and the love you're searching for might not come from where you expected, but it will find you once you start living in alignment with who you really are. For me, that meant walking away from the Matthews estate with nothing but my name and my truth, and somehow, that turned out to be everything. So please, if any part of this resonated with you, leave a comment. Share your story. Let this be a space where the overlooked and underestimated reclaim their voices. And if you're just beginning your own path toward truth and peace, I hope this gives you courage. Hit that like button if you're ready to live life on your terms. Subscribe to follow more stories like mine, stories of women and men who stopped performing and started healing. And most of all, share this with someone who needs to hear that their life is still theirs to shape. Because sometimes, the most radical act of self-worth is simply choosing yourself. If my story has touched you in any way, I want to ask for your support, not just by liking or subscribing, but by sharing your thoughts and encouragement in the comments below. Your words have the power to heal, to uplift, and to remind me, and others like me, that we are not alone in our struggles. If you've ever felt invisible or undervalued, I want you to speak up here. Tell me what strength means to you. Share your own experiences of reclaiming your worth, or simply offer a kind word. Every message helps build a community where we can heal together. Life has taught me that the hardest battles often happen quietly within. We spend so much time seeking approval from those who may never give it, but the true transformation begins when we stop chasing external validation and start believing in our own value. My advice to you, whether you're facing family rejection, professional dismissal, or personal doubt, is this: look within. Find your own truth and hold it close. Build your life around what fulfills you, not what others expect of you. The moment you claim your worth on your own terms is the moment freedom begins. Remember, walking away from toxic situations is not defeat, it's courage. It's choosing peace over pain, growth over stagnation, and self-love over conditional acceptance. So, please join me in this journey. Comment your story, offer your support, and let's remind each other that no matter the past, we hold the power to define our future. Together, we rise.